We are now up to Memches Hamid Beis. Rabbi Eliezer Omer, when the Torah says that she has to wait 30 days, and during these 30 days, she's boche es avia, it means avia mamish. She's leaving her father, and she cries bitterly and grieves over the loss of her father. And ima mamish, she grieves and cries over the separation between herself and her mother. That's according to Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Akiva Omer, avia ve'ima is a reference, an allusion to Avodas Kochavim. She is crying over the idols, the geshkas that she's leaving behind. V'cheinu Omer, Yirmiyahu Hanavi says, Omrim la'etz avi ata. So the pasuk uses the appellation, the description of the Avodah Zarah as Av. And here too, in the case of Eishes Yifas Toar, she is crying over her loss of Avodah Zarah. Pasuk says Yerach Yomi. Yerach means a month. She should cry on the separation from her father and her mother for a month. That's the Shita here, the Tanakama. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Tishim Yom. She has to cry for her father and her mother for 90 days. And how does he derive this? It says Yerach, and Yerach we know is 30 days. Then it says Yomim, which implies another 30 days. The Achrechen implies a third set of 30 days. Altogether, Habachia is 3 times 30 is 90 days. Maskifla, Ravina raised an objection on the formulation of Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar that V'achrechen adds another 30 days. Ema perhaps Yerach Shloshim, Yomim Shloshim. The Achrechen is adding the same period of time of both Shloshim and Yomim, which means another 60 days, which would mean all told 120 days. And then Tavo Alehu. How does Rabbi Shimon Elazar know that we should add only a third 30 day, making a total of 90 days? Kasha, the Gemara says we don't have an answer to that question. Tan Rabbanon, Mekaimim Avodim, Shenim Molim, Divrei Rabbi Yishmael, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Ein Mekaimim. The Brisa records a machlokes between Rabbi Yishmael and Rabbi Akiva about a Ben Yisrael who owns an Eved and he's not Gemalt, which means Lo Molu V'lo Kiblo Atzma Ol Mitzvahs. And the Eved still has the status of a guy. According to Rabbi Yishmael, that's allowed. Rabbi Akiva holds no. You're not allowed to have a Ben Yisrael is not allowed to be Machzik and Eved Shein Mol. Amalei Rabbi Yishmael to Rabbi Akiva, he says, Arei Omer, the Pasuk says in Shmos Gimel, with regard to Shabbos, and Parshas says, L'man Yanuach Shorcha V'Chamorcha, V'Nofesh Ben Amoscha Ve'Hager. So when the Torah says Ben Amoscha, it means an Eved Orel. The Gemara is going to spend some time trying to figure that out. But anyway, let's take it as an axiom. Ben Amoscha means an Eved Orel. And there's a mitzvah on the Adon vis-a-vis his Eved that he should be Shoves b'Shabbos. And the Eved is an Orel. So we see clearly, argues Rabbi Yishmael, that you're allowed to be Mekayim the Eved Orel. And therefore the Torah warns, or shall I say imposes, and enjoins the Eved and the Adon to see to it that his Eved is Shoves. Obviously, you're allowed to be Mekayim such an Eved, even though he's an Orel. On Malay, Rabbi Akiva says to Rabbi Yishmael, this is a very extreme case of Lokeach Eved Ben Hashmashos. It was Friday afternoon. He purchased the Eved. V'lo hispik lo mula. There was not enough time for Shabbos to circumcise that custom. That's the pasuk that enjoins the Adon to make sure that his Eved is Shoves. And the Eved was Kona, the Eved Ben Hashmashos on Erev Shabbos. He didn't have enough time to circumcise the Eved, but since he didn't have enough time to circumcise him, he's allowed to hold on to this Eved, and therefore he's Muzar al Shvisas, he has to see to it that the Eved rests on the Shabbos. But it's Stam Eved Orel, where he had an opportunity to be Mal, and there's plenty of time. Also, he's not allowed to hold on to a guy. The Torah allowed him to hold on to and own an Eved. And an Eved means he's Chayiv b'mitzvos. And for that, we need Milah. So if he had plenty of time to be Mal's Eved, and yet he did not do so, the Eved is an Oral, he's B'giyuso, he's a guy, then the Torah did not command you to see to it that he rests, because he's a guy. The Kula Almias, everybody agreed that that wasn't an issue between Rabbi Kiva and Rabbi Shmuel, that the Nafash Ben Amascha is B'Eved Oral Tzidmai Mashma. Why do we assume that Ben Amascha refers to an Eved Orel and not an Eved Mohul? My answer is the Sanya we learned in the Brisa. The Torah says the Nofesh Ben Amascha, and that's in Shmos Perek Chav Gimel. The Eved Orel HaKos Medaber, the Brisa says that it's an Eved Orel. Ata Omer, the Eved Orel Eino El B'Eved Mohul. So the Brisa asks itself the question, maybe the Nofesh Ben Amascha is referring to an Eved Mohul. What's the hechrech? What forces you to interpret that the pasuk is referring to an Eved Orel? And the Gemara answers, let's introduce a different parsha. Not this parsha in Shmos of Gimel, but the parsha at the beginning of Dvarim. In Perkei and Dvarim, L'man Yanuach Avdecha Vaschanon, this is the Aseres HaDibros, L'man Yanuach Avdecha V'Hamoscha Kamocha. All right, Eved Molam. All right, the Eved has to be Shoves on Shabbos. We're talking about an Eved Mol. Tzarech Lishvos. Mani Mekayim. So what do I do with the pasuk back in Shmos? The Nofesh Ben Amascha. It's not going to be a repeat, but rather it breaks new ground. The Eved Orel, and even in that case, he needs to be Shoves. So the Brisa is explicit that the Nofesh Ben Amascha is referring to an Eved Orel. Just that Rabbi Shmuel holds that's a regular case of an Eved Orel. And that's a proof that you're allowed to be Makayim in Eved Orel. Rabbi Kiva says it's a very unusual case of an Eved Orel, which the buyer purchased on Erev Shabbos, didn't have a chance to be Mala before Shabbos. And then it's mutter to be Makayim the Eved Orel until he does Milah. The Torah says that in the meantime he's Chayav Lishvos on that Shabbos. But a regular Eved Orel, the Torah did not be Mazayu that he should be Shomer Shabbos because you're not allowed to hold on to him. Now the pasuk that we started with in Shmos Chav Gimel adds the word Vager. What kind of ger are we talking about who needs to be Shomer on Shabbos? And the Brisa says Ze Ger Tosha. The Ger Tosha was makabel on himself not to worship idols. Again, he still eats nevela. Now here's Machlokes Rishonim as to whether or not the Ger Toshav has to observe Shabbos. And according to the Shita of Rashi, a Ger Toshav is Muzar al Shvisa Shabbos with a logic, a compelling logic that Machal Shabbos is like an Oved Avodas Kol Chavim. So therefore, since the Ger Toshav was makabel on himself not to worship an idol, therefore, ipso facto, he's not allowed to be Machal Shabbos. That's Rashi's Shita. And therefore, the Torah commands him on the Shabbos. However, many Rishonim, Tosfos, the Ramban, the Rashba, the Ritva, they all disagree and they ask kashas on Rashi. They reject Rashi. The Brisa doesn't mean that Vager and the Ger Toshav is Chayiv and Shmir Shabbos, like Yisrael, and he's enjoined from doing a malacha. But rather what the Bryce is telling me is the Torah prohibits the Yisrael to instruct the Ger Toshav to do a malach on Shabbos on behalf of Yisrael. Even if the Ger Toshav is not his Eved, it's still Asur. And even though Amirali Akav Shvus, but in a Ger Toshav Exeris HaKoshuv, that it's Asur for Yisrael to instruct the Ger Toshav to do malacha l'tzorch Yisrael on Shabbos. Tzorch Atzmo, for sure he's allowed to do malacha. The Brisa asks at the Omer, say Ger Toshav, O Eino Elo Ger Tzedek. Maybe the Torah is talking about a full-fledged Ger who accepted upon himself all Taryag mitzvahs. So the Gemara answers, Brisa answers, Geshu Omer. Pasuk says in Dvarim Perek Hey, if you got to Shmir Shas v'Ger Chasher b'Sharecha, Arei Ger Tzedek Omer. That he has to and he's required to be Shomer Shabbos. Amani Mekayim B'Ger, back in the Parshat Shmos Gimel, Zeger Toshav. Omer Rav Yeshua ben Levi Alukeach Eved Mina Akum. The Lo Ratza Lomul. So a Jewish person buys an Eved from a guy. And the Eved he refuses Milah, is Megalgal in Imoad Shnei Masar Chodesh. Will try for the next year, a 12-month period, to maybe to influence him that he should agree and allow Milah and be Mal. If he still refuses, Lo Mal, Lo Hiskima Evet Shemuloso, then Osel Hashasa Evet Etzlo. And therefore, Choser Hadon Umochel Yovde Kochovim. He's got to sell him. Amrua Bon and Kami to Rav Papa. The Chachamim were done in front in the presence of Rav Papa on this memory of Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, and they said, Kiman Delok Rabbi Akiva. It would seem that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is against Rabbi Akiva. To eat Rabbi Akiva, if we're going to say that Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi accepts Rabbi Akiva's opinion, Rabbi Akiva says you're not allowed to be Makayim and Eved without Milah. And Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is being matil l'kayim Eved for a full 12 months. Amalu Rav Papa responded to the Chacham, Afilu Temer Rabbi Akiva, I can reconcile Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi, even according to Rabbi Akiva. Hani Mili, when does Rabbi Akiva say that you're enjoined from being Makayim and Eved, which did not, who did not have Milah? That's only Hechtel, Pascal, and Milseh. It was never a point in which the Eved was willing to agree to Milah, to Mekabel on himself Lamu. Lo Pascha Milseh. Such an Eved, you're not allowed to be Masher according to Rabbi Akiva. Aval Hecha de Pascha Milseh. This is the case of Rabbi Yoshua, where the Eved agreed Pascha. Pascha means to terminate his gius, his state as a guy. And at the time of the Lekicha, he agreed Lisgayer V'lomu. He gave his okay, his approval. But then he changed his mind and he rescinded his original approval. Is Pascha, we accept his Kabbalah, his original Kabbalah, and we assume, or we hope and anticipate that eventually he'll go back to his original position, the Yirtzeh Shuv Lisgayer. And therefore you're allowed to be Mash in 12 months, because we're hoping that within that 12-month period, we'll go back to the original agreement and approval that he gave at the time when he was purchased as an Eved. And it'll be Misgayer. If he refuses again, even after the 12-month period, then we require that the Adon sell the Eved. He'll sell him to a guy. Amar Rav Kahana Risol Shmaita. I transmitted this shmua, meaning the member of Rav Papa, who differentiated Pascha Milsa Lo Pascha Milsa coming to Rav Zvid Minar Da the Amar Li, and in response, Rav Zvid said, "Ihachi." If even Rabbi Akiva agrees that if originally the Eved at the time of the Lekicha had agreed to the Lisgayer, then you'll have to be Mekayim and Megal Galima at Shnei B'Sar Chodesh. So then in the original brisa that we asked, Rabbi Akiva belokech Eved ben Hashmoshos. Why did Rabbi Akiva respond to the argument of Rabbi Shmuel? And when the Torah says V'inofesh ben Amoscha, we're talking about an Eved Orel in a case where he bought the Eved a minute before Shabbos, and he didn't have a chance to be Mal the Eved Lishni Leha. Why didn't he give the following answer to Rabbi Shmuel? That the pasuk of Ben Amoscha is referring to an Eved who was Pasach. He originally accepted upon himself to be Misgayer, and then he changed his mind, and we're allowed to be Megalgal for 12 months. And the Torah says you have to be careful that he shouldn't work for you on Shabbos. And Rabbi Akiva gave one of two different possible answers, but really he could have interpreted the pasuk in a case where the Eved had originally made a decision that he would want to be Miskayer, but Rabbi Akiva gave him a different answer that the case was he's lokeach the Eved ben Hashmoshos on Erev Shabbos. Sholach Ravin Mishmei de Rabbi Eloi v'chol Rabbosai Amuli b'Shmo. And all of his Rabbos of Ravin said the same bit in the name of Rabbi Eloi. Ezu Eved Orel shemutar l'kaimo. Ze Eved shelekocho Rabo almanas shelo lamulo. It's a naya halacha here. That if at the time of the purchase, the Adon had a t'nai, so to speak, he made a condition that he's buying it up front, but not to be malhin, the Eved will remain a god. And that's an Eved Orel shemutar l'kaimo. Amru Rabbanu Kami de Rav Papa. Kiman delok Rabbi Akiva, Rabbi Akiva doesn't allow you to hold on to a god without being malhin, without being megayer. And Rabbi Eloi says you can make a t'nai from the get-go at the time of L'kicha that he's not going to be malim, and then you're allowed to be Mekayim such an Eved guy. There a Papa field time Rabbi Akiva. Rabbi Akiva himself would also accept the principle of Rabbi Eloi. Hani Mili, when Rabbi Akiva said you're not allowed to be Mekayim, you can't own and maintain your possession over an Eved without Mila, that's only Heichad Belois Hani. Asni Mehedja, he didn't make an explicit tonight at the time of the L'kicha. Aval Heicha de Asni, if the Adon made a tonight with the Eved at the time of his L'kicha, that he would not mal him and not be Mekayim Asni, then the tonight is Kayim. And he's allowed to be Mekayim even in Eved Shalom Mal Me'olam. Frankly, I'm trying to find an explanation for this halacha, but that's the halacha. So again, Amar Rav Kana, the same spiel again. Amrito Shmaita, Kamid Rav Zidmi Nardot. The Amar Ali, and he asked me, if Rabbi Akiva agrees that if he was masna with the Eved from the get-go, at the time of L'kicha, he's allowed to be Mekayim him. He made it tonight that he won't be Megayer him, and there won't be Mila. He's talking the brisa of Rabbi Shmuel to Rabbi Akiva, Kikamale, Rabbi Akiva. Why did Rabbi Akiva respond to Rabbi Shmuel that V'inofash ben Amosecha is a case of a Lokech Eved ben Hashmosh lo hispik lo mulo? Why do you have to do all these somersaults in the air with a complicated ukipto lishne leha? Why don't you just say that we're talking about a case where the Adon was masna up front with the Eved b'shas l'kicha that he's not going to be malin? Rav Papa responds to Rav Kahana, or Rav Tzvid responds to Rav Kahana. He says to him, "L'taimech, you don't accept this answer. L'chani leichach. Why didn't Rabbi Akiva give the teretz to Rabbi Akiva that we're talking about Pascal and Milsei? El avadai chad mitrei taimikomer. So why not say chad mitrei utlas taimikomer? Rabbi Akiva could have given Rabbi Shmuel one of three possible answers. There are three ofanim in which Rabbi Akiva concedes that you're allowed to be Mekayim the Eved, even without Mila. Number one, if he was Kona the Eved, Erev Shabbos, he didn't have time to be Mala. Number two, if Posak Eved v'hiskim lamul u'liskayer. And number three, if he was Masna, the Adon was Masna with the Eved Chas L'kicha, Shalo Yomal also. So Rabbi Akiva had three possible answers to Rabbi Shmuel to explain the pasuk of Ben Amoscha. V'inofesh ben Amoscha in terms of Shmir Shabbos in that pasuk, and Rabbi Akiva every single opportunity he chose a different answer. And this leads us to Yosef Rabbi Chanina Bar Papi, which Amir Hashem will pick up in the next in the next sheet. Have a good night.